What's poppin', everyone? It's Aditi here, and I'm so excited to be teaching you today 7 storytelling tips. Okay, so I'm going to teach you 7 tips to boost your story content. Now, whether you use story right now in your content or not, these tips are going to help you enhance anything that you write, because I'm going to give you some tips that are going to give your stories and your content some more credibility. It's going to make your story stand out. It's going to make your brand stand out, and a whole bunch of good things. If you're not following me on Instagram at Aditi Creative, I share a lot of storytelling tips on there as well. So come join me on Instagram there. And today we're going to go over 7 tips that I've put together for you today. And these are tips that you can literally implement right away. Like as soon as you get off of this, you can go ahead and use it. So I am just setting everything up and we're going to get started in just a second. I am so excited. Storytelling is honestly probably one of my favorite topics to teach about, and I feel that people really, really love storytelling as well. And if you are intimidated by the idea of storytelling, what I want to tell you is that it's really just a practice, and it's something that you really want to give a try to, and over time it's a muscle that you can build. Okay, so for me, storytelling is something that I've just always really, I feel like, have been natural at, and I have wanted to I started using it in my business, and as I started using it in my business, I really found that it made my brand stand out, and people really connected to me on a deeper level than I expected. And people wanted to work with me because of the stories that I shared. And that actually surprised me initially, because I thought that I just had to have everything perfectly set up, like many of us think, right, with our brands. I thought that I had to do all these things to, like, stand out and whatever, but really it's your story that makes you stand out more than anything else. Um, I'm sorry, guys. I thought I was gonna know how to do this, but I feel like I don't know what I'm doing right now. Oh, okay. I found it. I'm trying to start a watch party, so that's what's happening here. Live storytelling class. All right. I think we are all set now. Okay. Where can I put my phone? I'll put it right here so I can see any comments coming from both places. All right. So here we are, my friends. Let's do this. Awesome. All right. So today we're talking about 7 tips to boost your story content. Like I said, whether you are using story in your content right now or not, you're going to be able to use these tips right away to implement into your content. So this is for anybody who is a content creator. So if you have a brand, you have a business, you create some sort of content, and that could be even presentations, it could be courses, it could be classes, it could be ebooks, it could be social media posts. Like if you create or write anything around those kind of things, that is all considered creating content. Okay, so sometimes people don't necessarily consider themselves a content creator, but if you're a business owner, you have a brand, you are a content creator, because you are creating things to write and put out into the world. All right. So here are 7 tips for you guys. If you're watching the replay or if you're watching us live, tell me what you are most excited to learn about today. Hi, Eva. Good to see you here. All right. And also, if you have any storytelling questions as well while I'm teaching, feel free to also put those in the comments, because whether I'm able to answer them today or not, I will answer them in an upcoming training or blog post, etc. Okay, so anything that comes up for you while I'm teaching, feel free to put that in here. All right, so first I want to talk to you about the power of storytelling. Storytelling, like I had mentioned as I was setting things up here, is storytelling is really how your brand communicates with the world. It's how your brand connects with the world. It's how your brand connects with your people. It is really that line of communication, right? And storytelling really connects your the heart of your brand to the heart of the people who are reading it, and the heart of the people who are receiving it. And I feel that storytelling really brings people together. It brings the right people to the right brands. And what I mean by that is kind of like, if you kind of think of it like soulmates, right? It's like the soul, you're bringing 2 soulmates together, the brand and the people who are meant to be together. They're meant to experience each other. They're meant to be in each other's presence. They're meant to help each other, whatever that looks like. I just find that storytelling really, really separates you from everybody else. So even if there are multiple people offering the same exact service as you are, right? Storytelling is what's going to make you stand out compared to everybody else, because nobody can replicate your story. Your story is unique to you. It's unique to your experiences. And many times people think they don't have a story. They're like, "Oh, well, my story is boring. I don't really have anything, etc., etc." But the truth is, everybody has a story, because if you have a life on this planet, you're breathing, you have a story, okay? Every single person has a story inside of them. It's just a matter of being able to bring this story out of you. And you'll be able to use these tips to kind of help you do that, because I really think it's kind of like a new language. It's like a new language, like being able to just communicate, because often, many times also, we're just so worried about, what are people gonna think, or am I doing this right? All of these things end up kind of clouding you just coming full with your authentic self and being able to share from your heart what your story is. And people want to know the leader behind the brand, because as Simon Sinek says, people buy why you do something rather than what you do. They are connected to the passion of why you do something, right? So it makes your brand stand out. It shows what makes you unique. It separates you from all the people who may be doing the exact same thing as you. Okay, so that is why your story is so, 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 so powerful. I have built my entire business pretty much on storytelling, because, in the marketing world, people tell you you need to have all of these things set up, the funnels, the sales process, the tactics, the this, the that, the emails, right? And I used to get so overwhelmed with all of these like things from the other marketing experts, and it made me think, I myself have studied marketing. I have 2 degrees in marketing, you guys. And if I'm getting overwhelmed, then I can't even imagine people who haven't studied marketing at all, what kind of overwhelmed they may be feeling, right? So that's when I was just like, you know what, this is not working for me, but I'm going to use what is working for me. And I started sharing my story, actually, before I knew it was working, what I was doing was I was sharing my story on live stream and etc etc, and I just found this pattern that more and more people were like, oh my god, I was just so drawn to you because of that story you told. And people would literally remember details of the story that I shared, which blew my mind because there were some stories I didn't even remember the details of anymore, but yet other people knew the exact. They were like, oh yeah, that day you said you wrote that story and you were wearing those red sneakers and you went into the forest and this happened. And I'm like, wait, what? So the power of storytelling is that stories get remembered. It's how people remember your brand. It's how it keeps your brand in the front of people's mind versus another brand. Stories get remembered. Okay. So as I started sharing my story, in the beginning of my business, I talked a lot about how I left corporate America. I was really depressed. Things weren't working for me. And I ended up, realizing that I could create a business with my gifts, with my expertise. And people were just like, oh my God, I resonate with that so much. Like my right people, right? People who connected to my brand were like, oh my God, you're just like my person. You just get me. And I really was really blown away by how many people wanted to work with me just because of the story I shared. So that's when I really started to understand the power of storytelling, and I started using it a lot more in different areas of my business. So I just wanted to give you a little overview of how powerful storytelling can be for your business, for your brand, whether you have started using it yet or not. These are going to be some tips that can help you really enhance your stories. All right, so let's get into tip number one. Tip number one is have a main focus. Oh my goodness, I can't emphasize this one enough because I find so many times people will start telling a story, right? And then next thing you know, it's going into like 15 different tangents. And I'm just like, I don't even know what's going on right now. I don't know what I'm reading. And I'm just going to scroll on to the next one. You don't want that to happen. You want people to read your story. You want them to be engaged with your story. You want them to keep reading your story, and you want them to feel like they got the main point of the story. Because if there's not a main point, then your story's not going to be remembered. Okay? Because that's how it's just going to end up being mumbo jumbo kind of thing. So you want to make sure your story has a main point, a main focus. Now, this may seem obvious, but you'd be surprised because I've read a lot of stories that people have written, and it just goes into many different places and you don't even realize you're doing it. I do it too sometimes. So that's why I have to go back through and clean it out and make sure, okay, does this follow a specific flow? Does it bring home the main story I'm trying to hit here, the main point I'm trying to hit here? Or am I just talking about random shit, right? So you want to look at that. All right, so here are some guidelines for you. What you can do is you can decide the point of your story ahead of time. So before you even write it, maybe what will happen is you'll have an idea in your head. You're like, oh my God, I want to write this story about this thing that happened. Okay, so you'll be like, all right, but if I'm going to write that story, what is the point of that story? What exactly am I trying to get at here? So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is you might remember the story, but you're like, I know I could probably have a main point here, but I don't know what it is exactly. So then what you want to do is you just want to write it out. And then as you're writing it out, see if you can find some points, and you might even find 3 points that you can go into different areas into. So what you want to do is just pick one of those points, because sometimes I'll write a story and I'm like, oh, I learned like 5 lessons in this situation that happened, right? So I'll be like, okay, so which one do I want to focus on though? So maybe I'll just want to focus on one of them. And then what you can do is take those 4 lessons and you can share that story again with a twist another time later on. All right, so that is how you can kind of have your main focus and figure out what it is that you want to talk about. So yeah, so make sure your story sticks to this and doesn't go on 15 tangents, okay? So this is probably the most important one that I can share with you. Okay, so tip number two is to use numbers. Ooh, I really like this one because I feel like this is definitely an overlooked one that can really boost and enhance your story and really add that level of credibility that you didn't have before, or maybe you did have, but it just makes it even stronger. So, what do I mean by use numbers? So, if your story has some sort of number in it, for example, a number of years, number of like a number of pounds, or number of miles that were driven, or whatever that may be, that could kind of just make that pop for you. Okay, numbers make your story pop. So here are some examples of what I mean. Okay, so if you're writing a story, instead of saying I lost weight, right? If you're showing a result about losing weight, and you're trying to show your expertise, whatever that may be, instead of saying I lost weight, I want you to put a number there. Say I lost 20 pounds, okay, if that is the number. Instead of saying I eliminated all of my debt, say I eliminated 26K of debt. Instead of saying I got a pay increase, you can say I got a 5% pay increase. So do you see how over here it's kind of vague on the left side, but then on the right side, when you add in the numbers, it just adds this kind of strength to your story. It adds this pop, it adds this credibility. It even makes it more believable, because you're like, okay, this person's not making it up. Like, why would they say 26K? Like, it's very specific, right? 5%, 20 pounds. Like, it makes it more specific, more believable. It gives your story more credibility. Okay, now here's a point I want to make. Don't make these numbers up, okay? Because people can sniff inauthenticity. So if your story has numbers, then add them. But if your story does not have any sort of numbers, then don't worry about it. But this is if your story does have numbers, I say add it in. But please, for the love of God, please do not make up numbers, okay? We do not want to be lying in our stories, because the whole point of this is to really be an extension. Our stories are an extension of who we are. Our stories are an extension of our brand, okay? So we want to make sure we're staying true to ourselves, true to our word, we're being in integrity, all that kind of stuff. All right. Tip number three is to leave the extra details out. I made a joke, I think, on another live stream I did earlier, where I was like, okay, we don't want to know that you took 3 left turns to get to your grandma's house. Okay, we don't care. Like, well, how is that even relevant to the story? Unless it is relevant to the story, right? But in this case, it's not relevant to the story. What we do want to know is how you automated your grandma's finances, if that's your expertise. I'm just giving you an example. Okay, so I hear this all the time when people tell stories, and like, you lose people. You literally lose people because they're just like, wait, what? Your brain is trying to like take in everything that's being said, and you're just like, I don't know what's happening here right now, so I'm just gonna tune it out. We don't want that. We want people to be tuned into the story. We want them to pay attention. We want to have their attention, right? So how do we do that? We leave the extra details out, and we only leave the important things in it. And I'll tell you what some of the important things are. But when you go through your story, you really want to look at, is this relevant to what my main point is here? Okay, so it ties back to having that main point. If you have a main point, you'll know what will be an extra detail versus not. Initially, you'll probably write it all out, is what I suggest, and then you can go back and clean it up. So don't worry about having it perfect on your first draft. The point is, after you write it, when you're editing it, that's when you're going to take the extra details out. Okay, so just pay attention to that. So what is important? Your why is important. Your why is why you started this brand, why you do this work, why you're passionate about this. What got you here? What was the moment that brought you from where you were to where you are now? What did that look like? What inspired you? What brought you here? Next is your process. That process that got you here, the process you took to do whatever it is that you have accomplished. Your expertise, we want to know about that. We want to know about, what makes you certify, or what makes you qualified to do this work? How can you help us? And then the last one is, how can you help? How can your brand help us? How can your brand help the person who's reading the story? And then anything else, I want you to use your intuition, and I want you to let your intuition guide you. Okay? So you can see, I want you to start building that filter for yourself to see what is important and what is not. Like I said, storytelling is a muscle. Over time, you'll kind of intuitively be able to write your stories, but in the beginning, it will be a learning curve. And then as you do it more and more, it will be more intuitive for you. Okay? All right, tip number 4 is to make it readable. Oh my God, you guys. Have you ever seen those Instagram captions that are just like the longest paragraph you've ever seen in your life? And you're just like, I just can't read this. I don't know about you guys, but like, I don't know how people read those. Like, I just can't even handle it. Like, even when people want me to review their content, my clients and stuff, I'm like, look, you need to space this out before you can ever get my eyes on it, because I can't even digest what's happening here right now. So I'm like huge on formatting in a way that makes it readable for people. Spaces are our friend, you guys. This is not the way you're going to be writing your stories, is not the way you wrote essays in school with perfect paragraphs, perfect indents, perfect all the things, right? This is actually to be able to read it for people who are on social media. This is for the lazy eye. So we want to make it as readable as possible. Sometimes people even just write lines with a space in between each of them. It depends on how you want to do it. Again, use your discretion, use your intuition on what makes sense. But please, for the love of God, make your story readable. Because if it's not readable, people are just going to keep scrolling. They're going to be like, no thanks. I can't read this. It's too much. Okay? You know, many times people tell me, Aditi, sometimes your stories are so long, but I just can't stop reading it. Like, I just find myself reading, reading, reading. Next thing I know, I'm at the bottom. And I make an effort to make it readable because I know that I can't read heavy text and all that kind of stuff. So I try to space it out to make it easier on the eye so people can read it easily. Okay? So pay attention to formatting. Like I said, make sure you space your stuff out. Make sure you space your story out. This is not a school paper. You're not being graded. What is happening here? What your goal is to actually get your story read. So, you know, you can even ask someone else's opinion, be like, hey, like, is this readable? Can you read this easily? Or like, is it hard on the eye, etc. So that's a good way to kind of look at it. All right. So yeah, pay attention to the readability of it. Pay attention to, are you using complicated words? Like, are people tripping up as they're reading it? Because I know sometimes I'll use words that I don't even use in real life, and it makes it harder to read. So you want to think about that. Like, look at your, again, this will probably be, you know, in your editing phase after you've already written it. You're going to look at, okay, what can I clean up here? What doesn't sound like me? What just sounds too complicated? You know, you don't want people to have to stop reading your story and have to go look up a dictionary of what that word means. You feel me? I've had to do that before. I'm just like, I don't even know what that word means. I need to go look it up. And by the time you look it up, you may not even come back to the story. So you want to make sure your story is readable. You want to focus on simplicity, okay? Simplicity. I love that phrase, keep it simple, stupid, the KISS method. It is seriously my anthem. Anytime I look at my clients' work and their content, I'm just like, this is just, many times we start in a very complicated way. I think maybe it's because we think it needs to be complicated because it makes it more important, or I don't know, right? We just have all these ideas in our head that make us do it in a certain way. So you want to make sure you're focusing on simplicity. Okay? Let's get on to tip number 5. Let it flow. Okay? So as your story is readable, you want to also make sure it flows. Does your story make sense? Does your story transition easily? Because sometimes you're talking about one moment in your life and then you're switching to a different moment in your life. Does it flow easily? Does it make sense? Um, sometimes those transitions are really abrupt, and it kind of throws off the flow of the story, which throws off, I believe it throws off the connection that the person can have to the story when it's kind of broken up like that. So you want to make sure it flows, okay? So again, you're going to be likely doing this when you're editing, as you want to pay attention to the transitions. Okay, so maybe you're talking about one part of your story in the beginning, and then maybe you're talking about another part of your story after that, or maybe you're talking about your before and after, whatever that looks like. But does it flow? Is it easy to read? The easy to read and let it flow are somewhat similar, but the reason I separated it is because the readability, I was really thinking about the strain on the eye versus let it flow is like, does the story actually read and flow well? Like the actual parts of the story. Does it make sense? Do all the pieces of the story go together well? Sometimes I see people writing stories and again, there's 15 tangents and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't all go together. Like we're just jumping around in different places. Okay, so we don't want that. We want to make sure that the story flows. And one of the best ways to do this is through reading it out loud. Just read the story out loud, and you'll automatically see the bumps in your story where you can make it smoother. Um, Let me see if I could think of an example. Like, let's say you're talking about something that happened to you in your childhood, and then you're talking about your adult life, right? And it's like an abrupt jump from childhood to adult, but you're like, okay, I need to make this flow better. So maybe you can say in between as a transition, you can say, and because of what I went through when I was 5 years old, as I grew up, it helped me see, right? So then it's a transition sentence. So that is how you can kind of make it flow. So that's an example for you. All right. So tip number 6 is relevance. What is the relevance of the story, not only to the brand, but also to the reader? What is the relevance to the reader? What is the relevance in the sense of why should they care? Okay, so you don't want to just be sharing any old random story for no reason. Your story should have a purpose. So, how is this story relevant to the reader? Bring it back home for them. Why should they care about the story? What does this mean for them? I've been using the financial coach example a lot, so it's just on the top of my head, so I'm going to run with that. But let's say you're sharing that you eliminate $26,000 of debt. Okay, that's great. Good for you. Nice for you. Why should I care? Why should I care? I should care, right? Why should you care? You want to like think about why is it relevant to them? Okay, you should care because if you have debt and you want to eliminate debt too, I have a process that's going to help you do that. Or if you have debt and you don't feel like you'll ever be able to eliminate your debt, let my story be a confidence boost, be hope for you that this can happen for you too. Let my story be an example for you, right? So you want to bring that home in your story. Otherwise, it's just going to be like, is this person just bragging about their life? You know what I mean? It's not going to make sense. You want to make sure it ties it back to the reader. I'm writing this for anyone who needs to hear this, who is going through this themselves. I want to let you know that this is possible for you too. Ooh, I can just feel the chills in my body as I'm saying that, because when you bring it home for the reader like that, that's when you build that connection. That's where you build that heart connection. That's where, you really build that relationship with your consumer. I love the word consumer because consumer could be consuming your content, it could be consuming your products, buying your products. It really goes on all levels. And so think about that, right? Whoever is consuming your story, why should they care? And you want to think about the person you're writing the story for, not just everybody in the world, because everybody in the world is not going to care. So you want to make sure your story is relevant to the person you want it to be relevant for. So for example, you're trying to help people eliminate their debt, right? So how can you make the story relevant for them? How can you bring it home for them? Why should they care? What does this mean for them? All those good things. All right, so make sure your story has relevance. And tip number 7 is captivating. Make your story captivating. How can your story be interesting? Many times people think they have a boring story, but I've taken so many stories that people have thought was boring, and I've made it sound so interesting just by my use of words, just by my choice of words, just by the way I formatted the story. So you want to think, how can I make this more captivating? How can I make this more interesting? And I recommend you do that after you write it, because if you try to think about how can I make this captivating before you write it, you're just gonna probably leave yourself in a lull and you're just gonna be like, this is too hard, I can't do this. So I think it's easier after you write it, then you go back and see how you can make it more interesting. Okay, so does it grab their attention? Does it make them want to read it? Does it make them want to keep reading it? So, as you know, on social media, many times they only show you the first sentence, and then you have to press read more or see more in order for them to read it. So, you want to grab their attention in that first sentence. Does it make them want to read? Does it make them want to click see more? Right? Same thing with your emails. If you're sending it out as an email, does your subject line of your email make them want to read it? Does it make them want to open your email? Next thing, does it make them want to keep reading? Because once they press see more, it doesn't guarantee they're going to read it. You still want them to keep wanting to read it. So how do you do that? You make the story interesting. You make it flow well. You make it readable. You make it captivating. All the things. Like I was saying earlier, people have been telling me here and there sometimes, like, oh, your stories are so long, but I read them all. I can't, like, you just keep me engaged. Like, I want to know what happened next. And I'm like, yeah. So, like, that is how you want to keep them reading, right? So your story is actually read to the people who you want it to be read by. All right. So these are your 7 tips. Let me know if you guys have questions. Even if you're watching the replay later on, feel free to put it in the comments below and tell me what questions you have about storytelling. Tell me what is stumping you up about storytelling. Tell me what you're nervous about, why you haven't added it yet to your marketing plan, what you're afraid about, how I can help you with it, anything and everything. I want to make this easy for you. I want to help you build the confidence to be able to share your story, because that's a whole nother level of it. Like, writing your story is one skill, but then being able to actually have the confidence to share it is a whole nother step. Okay. And then if you're really serious about adding storytelling to your plan, I'm teaching a storytelling course right now live. So if you want to be a part of that, come check it out at aditicreative.com/storytelling. These are the things I'm going to be going over inside of the course. This course will be available for you later, but right now I'm teaching it live. So you're going to have an opportunity to be a part of the live coaching calls where I'm going to be reviewing your stories that you write and giving you feedback. See, what happens is many times we're in our head when we write our stories. So when we have somebody else who has that storytelling eye look at it, I can really help you supercharge your story, make it stronger, help you make it interesting, help you make it captivating, really help you get into the weeds of it a little bit stronger. All right, so this is what we're going to be going over in the course. This is what all the different modules are going to be covering, is how storytelling enhances your marketing efforts, 5 stories you can add to your marketing plan right away, the 5-part story framework, the process to write your brand story. So I literally have guided prompts in there that show you how to write your story one step at a time. And then I'm going to teach you how to build your story train, which I go into that more inside the course on what that means, on how that works. Because, for example, people are like, so do I just share my brand story again and again all the time? or do I share something else? So your story train is going to be different parts of your brand story, and I'm going to show you how to write those and create that as well. And then last but not least, where and how to share your brand story. Okay, so check it out at aditicreative.com/storytelling. If you have questions about it, feel free to come and ask me. I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions. And I'm gonna have some more free resources and stuff coming up on there too. So make sure to check back on that link later on. I'm gonna be sharing more and more storytelling tips because I realize this really is what I enjoy more than anything else. I so enjoy teaching storytelling, and it comes pretty natural to me. And I am really excited to help you use storytelling in your brand to stand out amongst the others who are doing the same thing as you. So I'd be honored to help you write your stories. Come join me in the storytelling course. It's going to be phenomenal. I just finished writing the entire storytelling script, and I'm including everything to help you build that confidence to share your story and write your story. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you're watching the replay, let me know. Tell me any takeaways. Tell me your favorite tip that you learned today. Tell me which tip you're going to implement right away that you can use. And tell me everything. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Love you so much. And also, I'm sharing storytelling tips on my Instagram. So make sure to follow me there at Aditi Creative. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.